Hey internet friends, something strange has been happening to the US economy since 2020. Or you could really say in 1913 when the Federal Reserve was established. But in particular, something really strange has been happening to the US economy for the last month. Grocery prices are at their most expensive. There were more job cuts this October than any October since 2003. Credit card debt has reached an all-time high of $1.2 trillion. The government is shut down, which is now affecting air travel. SNAP benefits have not been reinstated and are still a point of contention, and the Federal Reserve is just twerking on the money printer. And me, I'm just over here trying to figure out if they're trying to purposefully crash everything, ushering in all of the chaos, pitting us against each other, bringing on UBI and the digital dollar as the default, or perhaps a delightful combination of all of the aforementioned. Something strange is happening to the US economy. Let's begin. The government shutdown is now the longest shutdown in all of US history, but it's funny because the IRS is still somehow alive and kicking, gobbling up all our taxes. Like, when can we shut down the IRS? When does that get shut down? They're canceling flights? No, let's cancel the IRS.
Yes, excellent.
Anyway, I digress. It's funny how the government shuts down and basically nothing changes in the average person's day-to-day. But we can't forget about how the impact now extends to over 800,000 federal workers who are either furloughed or working without pay. This extends to air traffic controllers and Coast Guard, as well as TSA, who are security thespians. Some of the national parks have closed, FDA food inspections are dwindling, and federal courts are out of money. People who want the government to reopen say that it's the unseen which is the most critical. The stalled infrastructure projects, the research that's been suspended, and the oversight that's been cut off. And they've just announced that there's this huge list, 40 airports, that will have flight capacity reduced by 10% as early as tomorrow, all due to the government shutdown, including Anchorage International, Hartsfield-Jackson, Boston-Logan, Baltimore-Washington. The point is, flight travel is being restricted as we approach this holiday season, so plan accordingly.
Oh my gosh. What?
Most of the controllers can navigate missing one paycheck. Virtually none of them can navigate missing two paychecks. That second paycheck comes this Tuesday. And so if this shutdown doesn't end relatively soon, the consequence of that is going to be more controllers don't come to work, and then we're going to have to continue to assess the pressure in the airspace and make decisions that may, again, move us from 10% to 15%, maybe to 20%.
While food pantry lines are wrapped around the block in record numbers across the country, the most recent update on SNAP EBT food stamps is that the White House says it will partially fund SNAP benefits. This comes after Trump threatened to withhold them until the shutdown ends. In my last video, we discussed the details of the SNAP EBT food stamps program that's been suspended for November as part of the government shutdown, affecting 42 million people. Why are 42 million people on food stamps? What percentage of those 42 million are actual Americans?
Day one of USDA, February 13th, is we sent letters to every governor in America being very clear that no illegal aliens can use SNAP. 0, 0, 0. We asked every state for the first time in history, and this was in February, to send us their data and let us, with DOJ and a war room, actually start going through this data to better understand how this explosion of SNAP benefits happened under Joe Biden. We increased almost 40% on this program in just a couple of years under the Biden administration.
A lot of y'all in the comments were mad at me because I said that these taxpayer-funded programs are unsustainable in the long term when they are abused in a Cloward Piven strategy sort of way, which is what we're seeing with the influx of aliens and people who just don't want to work on these programs. That's just reality. If you want to go watch, I have an entire video on Cloward Piven. I'll define it for you here, though. For everybody who doesn't know, it's when there's a mass enrollment of people in welfare programs that essentially overloads the system, which leads to a crisis that forces government reform. And maybe one of those outcomes would be something like a universal basic income or digital dollar, something like that. The possibilities are really endless here. And in my last video, when I said that SNAP was a total scam, it wasn't a moral judgment on anyone on these programs. It was a moral judgment on the government who makes these programs. I wasn't talking about people who physically cannot work, children, elderly, disabled. Would I rather taxpayer money go to Americans than Israel and forever wars? Of course. I'm not backtracking. I'm not walking it back. I'm doubling down. I'm doubling down on my stance. Everything is unsustainable. It is all headed for collapse when the average person on SNAP or on any government assistance sitting in Section 8 housing is financially better off than any perceived middle-class individual who is just saddled with compound interest and debt the second they become an adult. And I don't want to say it, this isn't a nice thing to say, this isn't a nice slice of reality here, but most people who consider themselves part of the middle class are broke because they owe money on their mortgage, their cars, their credit cards, their student loans. Nothing is actually owned. I'm right there with you. Very objectively, being in debt, getting all the life sucked out of you by the usurers, working day in and day out as a debt slave, is financially worse than being broke. And that's not me saying it's a bad life. Not at all. Or anything anyone should be ashamed of when you're putting food on the table for your family and providing for them. I'm just saying it's expensive. It's a predatory and broken system, and it didn't have to be this way. Like I told you in the beginning, credit card debt has reached an all-time high of $1.2 trillion. Groceries are at an all-time high. And on top of that, property taxes on every purchase, buying food and clothes and whatever other necessities with your after-tax earnings, taxes and insurance and more taxes taken out of every paycheck, leaving you with very little to cover medical bills, childcare, hyperinflated anything. All while being a law-abiding citizen, never stepping out of line, just being your garden variety fellow American, even a self-proclaimed patriot. What do you get from the politicians for being so upstanding? For paying your share. You get your country flooded with people who don't belong here. Then you get scorned for saying anything about it. Grocery prices are never coming down because the dollar has been massively devalued over the last 5 years. So it's higher prices on everything, unaffordable housing and more taxes, more government programs, more top-down control. And what do you get? You get more of your hard-earned money going to forever wars, going to places where you and I will never visit, to people who hate us for our beliefs. And the quietly bubbling rage behind all of these one-sided transactions isn't actually what makes this whole thing unsustainable. It's on paper. On paper, we're cooked, and they know it. And actually, if we were to really analyze this, I think the kiss of death was shutting down most of the country for almost 2 years and driving out small businesses. Printing trillions of dollars and injecting it into our economy, all at the behest of the government. So how is the government being shut down a bad thing when the government running normally was actually the worst thing ever?
Announced corporate job cuts, Andrew, in the U.S. surging past 1 million so far this year, with 153,000 new layoffs announced just in October, according to Challenger. That is the worst October since 2003. Some industries are correcting after the hiring boom of the pandemic, but this comes as AI adoption, softening consumer and corporate spending, and rising costs drive belt tightening and hiring freezes.
Been doing these economic reports for almost 5 years now. The frog has been boiling this entire time. So now, while they report that unemployment was at 4.3% in August, the true numbers are actually much higher. Because that 4.3 is only considering people who are actively seeking full-time employment. Broader measures show that it's more like 7 to 8% or even upwards of 10%. And long-term unemployment is rising. Pop quiz, what was the unemployment rate during the Great Depression? And what was a key factor of the Great Depression? Bank runs and failures. And this is where it gets interesting. And by interesting, I don't mean interesting, because reported on October 31st, the Federal Reserve, a foreign banking entity with no allegiance to our country, printed $30 billion in just 2 days. The biggest money printing event over the last 3 years. And the U.S. Federal Reserve has injected about $125 billion into the banking system over the last 5 days via its standing repo facility, using overnight repurchase agreements where banks can swap out U.S. Treasuries for cash. It's been said that this is the largest short-term liquidity move since the 2020 COVID crisis. They're saying they did this because it provides a temporary buffer for banks to handle withdrawals and loans. So they have money on hand when you need to take money out of the bank. They didn't have it, now they do. Apparently, bank reserves are at their lowest in 4 years, just sitting at $2.8 trillion. There's a really fun term for this called stealth easing, but it's really just making the money printer go burr. And just as a crass reminder, it's just some butt face with a computer screen pressing a button, making these numbers up out of thin air while the majority of the populace works day in and day out for scraps. It's all make-believe To misquote John Green, the money was paper, but the debt slavery was not. This isn't really a fear-mongering thing. I'm not going to tell you to go out and raid the shelves or get in your bunker, but I'm saying it's part boiling frog, part Hegelian dialectic, part natural cycle. The entire economy is just held together with duct tape and Elmer's glue and a few pieces of bubblegum here and there. So while something strange is going on with the U.S. economy right now, strange is really... We're leaving. Goodbye. Bye, baby. Strange is an understatement. And it's been going on for a while now, accelerating, in particular in 2020. When the U.S. doesn't even control its own monetary policy, what does it actually control? What do you think, internet friends? You know, I always look forward to reading your comments. Thank you so much for watching, subscribing, and supporting my channel on Patreon, and for buying my book, The Deep State Encyclopedia. Bye.